She gave birth with chains around her wrists. No doctor, no mercy, just enemies watching as her body broke. And still, she lived. Now he'll burn the world to make sure no one ever touches her again. This is Book 2 of the Devil's Heir trilogy, The Heir They Tried to End. If you're just joining us, welcome to the fire. However, you need to go back to Book 1 to see how it all started. Let's begin. The first time I saw fear in Andrea Marcarelli's eyes, it wasn't during war. Not even when I came home bleeding and bruised, carrying the child who was never supposed to exist. It was the day I started to show. He didn't say it. He didn't need to. The way his eyes stayed on my belly like he was counting heartbeats, the way he shadowed my every step, always too close, always too silent, the way he watched the doors, the windows, the sky, like he knew fate was sharpening its knife again. He didn't trust peace, and he didn't trust the world with me. "You're not sleeping," I said one night. He was standing by the bedroom window, shirtless, tense, his hand wrapped around a tumbler of something he hadn't touched. "Neither are you," he said quietly. I ran my hand over my stomach. The swell had come fast. My body had surrendered to it overnight, softening, stretching. I was still me, but I wasn't mine anymore. I was hers, ours, and I was terrified. But Andrea? Andrea was haunted. "She's strong," I whispered. "She better be." "She is." He turned toward me. His eyes were sharp, distant, wounded in a way that felt too old to be from now. "This is different," he said. I nodded. He came to the bed, sat beside me, pressed his hand to my stomach, the way he always did before he spoke about her, like touching her was the only way he could believe she was real. "I can't lose you," he said. "You won't." I almost did, twice. He looked at me then, really looked. This time I wouldn't survive it. He had seen death, that he had delivered it. But nothing scared him like this child growing inside me. Not because she was weak, because he was. For her, he doubled the guards, tripled the surveillance, made Luca audit the entire estate's protocols twice in 1 week, but none of it helped the sick feeling in his gut. Or mine. Because something was wrong. It started with the gate logs. An entry recorded, but no visitor. Lucia said it was a glitch. Andrea didn't believe in glitches. Then one of the perimeter guards quit without notice. No goodbye. No warning. Just gone. And then, this morning, the sonogram image was gone from the fridge. No one had touched it. No one would dare. And yet it wasn't there. "You think someone was in the house?" I asked, hand frozen mid-stir at the kitchen stove. Andrea didn't answer. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, gaze locked on me, like the air itself might try to cut me. I set the spoon down. "Tell me." He walked forward, took my face in his hands. "I will burn this city down before I let her be taken." My throat tightened. "What about me?" His jaw tensed. "You are already mine. The world knows that." His thumb brushed over my cheekbone. "But her, she's still just a promise. I won't let them take it." That night, when I curled around the baby bump and tried to sleep, he stayed awake again. I felt his hand on my hip, his breath behind my neck, his heartbeat, too fast, too strong, and I knew. This wasn't just fear. It was grief waiting to happen, and he was already bracing for it. The next day I found our son in the library, curled on a cushion with a picture book, his toy car tucked under one arm. Marco looked up when he saw me, his whole face lighting like it always did. "Mama?" He ran to me, threw his little arms around my legs and pressed his cheek to my belly. "Is she awake?" I smiled. "She might be." "Tell her I said hi." I did. Then I picked him up and held him longer than I needed to, because I couldn't shake the thought that kept circling my brain like a vulture. If something happens to me, who will love him like I do? I told Andrea I needed air. He sent 2 guards with me. We walked the gardens behind the estate. Quiet, beautiful, blooming with spring. Marco chased butterflies, laughed at bees, asked me if the baby would cry when she came. I said yes. He said he'd protect her. And I believed him. Even if the world went to hell, I believed my 3-year-old son would die trying to protect his baby sister. Because love like ours doesn't care how small you are. It just fights. Andrea was waiting when we returned, not outside. Inside, in the shadows by the stairs. He didn't greet Marco, didn't greet me, just looked at the guards. "You took the garden path?" They nodded. "Yes, boss." "And the north cameras were functioning?" One of them hesitated. Only for a second, but it was enough. Andrea stepped forward. "I want every log from the past 24 hours reviewed. If 1 second is missing, burn it all." The guards disappeared. Marco held tighter to my hand. I bent down and kissed his curls. "It's okay, baby," he whispered. "Is Papa mad?" I looked over his shoulder. Andrea's jaw was clenched tight enough to crack bone. "No," I lied. "Papa's just tired." That night, Andrea slept in the nursery. He took the couch by Marco's bed, a pistol within arm's reach. Not for Marco, for whoever might come. I watched them from the doorway. My son, my husband, claimed in every way but legal, and our unborn daughter. I had everything I never thought I'd have, and I was closer than ever to losing it. Because something had shifted in him. This wasn't the man who hunted me. This wasn't the man who once let his grief make him cruel. This was a man who'd been given something precious, twice. And this time, he wasn't letting it go without a war. He doesn't know I'm not his mother by blood. Not really. Marco was only hours old when I ran with him, when I wrapped him in a hospital blanket, soaked in the blood of the woman who bore him, and whispered a promise I had no right to make. "I'll keep you safe. I'll keep you mine. I won't let them do to you what they did to her." And somehow, I kept it. He's 3 now, all messy curls and bright, wide eyes, fiercely loyal, dangerously curious, always watching his father, always testing the edges of what he's allowed to do. And when he calls me Mama, he means it with every beat of his little heart. No hesitation, no confusion, no space between the woman who gave him life and the one who gave him everything else. This morning, he climbed into bed with me before dawn, curled under the covers with one hand on my stomach like he was guarding his sister himself. "She's kicking," he whispered. I smiled through the fog of sleep. "She knows you're there. She likes me best. Probably. Because I'm the big brother. That's a very important job." He nodded, serious. "I won't let the bad guys get her." My throat tightened. Because I believed him. Because I also knew he shouldn't have to say it. Andrea walked in an hour later and found us still curled together. No guards, no locked doors, just sunlight, quiet, and peace, which meant he hated it instantly. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He stood at the foot of the bed, hands behind his back, mouth a firm line. But his eyes, they flicked over Marco, then to my belly, and then to the window, like he was waiting for it to shatter. "Come here, Papa," Marco chirped. Andrea didn't move, not until I sat up, pressed my hand to the mattress, gave him the smallest nod, then he came. And when he knelt on the edge of the bed, Marco lunged into his arms without a second thought. "I heard her kicking," Marco said proudly. "She's ready to come out." Andrea's hand found my belly, but it was Marco he looked at. "Not yet," he murmured. "She's not safe enough yet." Marco frowned. "We're safe." Andrea smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know." After breakfast, Andrea left to handle something urgent, which meant someone had either moved against us, or he thought they might. He never said details out loud anymore. Not when I was in earshot, not when Marco could hear, but I knew the signs. The way Luca lingered at the doorway, eyes sharper than usual. The way Andrea whispered in Italian, low, fast, tense. The way my name came last. Marco tugged my hand once Andrea was gone. "Can we go to the playroom?" I nodded. And we walked together through the quiet hallways, flanked by guards, watched by cameras, surrounded by luxury we both ignored. The playroom used to belong to Andrea's late wife. I could still feel her fingerprints on the bookshelves. The hand-painted mural of a lion and a lamb. The delicate little ballerina mobile tucked in a far corner, still spinning when the air moved just right. She never got to use this room. But Marco did. And now, so would her daughter. He ran to his train set. Started muttering a story under his breath about Papa the dragon and Mama the fire queen. I sat on the chaise, watched him play, pressed my hand to the rhythmic kicks rolling under my ribs, and tried to breathe. I knew something was coming. Even if Andrea hadn't said it, even if the guards hadn't doubled, even if the night patrols hadn't started circling wider, I could feel it. The silence was too heavy. The peace too clean, like a stage perfectly set, just waiting for the first drop of blood. Marco turned to me after 20 minutes. "Can I show her the book?" I blinked. "What book?" He ran to the little basket by the shelf, pulled out a battered, dog-eared picture book with a torn spine and crayons scribbled across the cover. "This one!" It was the first book I ever read to him. The night we went on the run, the night I held him in a motel bathtub and whispered, "You're gonna live, you hear me?" He toddled back and climbed beside me, propped the book on my belly, and began to read. His voice stumbled over the words, but I didn't care. He pointed to every picture, named every animal, gave every voice a new accent, half of them terrible impressions of Andrea. And when the book was over, he kissed my belly and whispered, "Don't be scared. I already love you." I turned my face so he wouldn't see the tears, because how do you explain to a child that love doesn't stop bad things? That sometimes the world takes what you love just to see if it can break you? That monsters don't care about bedtime stories or baby kicks or brave big brothers? They care about blood. And Andrea's family had spilled too much of it. "Do you miss Nana?" Marco asked suddenly. I froze. He didn't ask about her often. Andrea's late wife, his birth mother, the woman whose death carved a hole in this family deep enough for me to fall through. I didn't know what to say. So I told the truth. I didn't know her. But she was my mama before? I nodded. Yes, but now you are. Yes. Why? Because I chose to be. He smiled, and for a moment it felt like enough. Later that night I asked Andrea if he'd visited the grave again. He didn't answer right away, just poured himself a drink, took a slow sip, looked out the window into the dark. "You're not a replacement," he said finally. "I know, but she died giving me a child." I nodded. "And now you carry mine." He turned, and I saw it there. Not fear, not guilt, not even grief, but rage, sharp, quiet, cold. "They won't touch you, even if they try?" He stepped closer and kissed my stomach like a vow. "They can try." I didn't hear his name the first time. It slipped past me like a draft under a door, too quiet to catch, too wrong to understand. Andrea was in the study with Luca. The door cracked just enough for sound to bleed into the hall. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was walking past, carrying a glass of water, trying to ignore the ache in my lower back and the way my daughter shifted restlessly inside me like she already knew something was wrong. I heard my own name first, then Marco's. Then Andrea said a word he never said lightly. "Impossible." I stopped. The glass trembled in my hand. When Luca spoke again, his voice was lower. "Careful, the way men talk when they're afraid of waking something old." "We confirmed it twice," he said. "He was reported dead after the purge. No body, no funeral. He disappeared across the border and took a new name." Andrea exhaled slowly. "Say it." There was a pause. Then Raffaele Santori. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the marble. Andrea was on his feet instantly. He didn't shout, didn't ask if I was hurt. He crossed the room and took my face in his hands like the world might fall apart if he didn't hold it together himself. "Are you bleeding?" "No," I whispered. "Just startled." He searched my eyes anyway. Then he looked past me, to the hallway, the cameras, the air. "Luca," he said quietly, "get out." The door shut, locked, and suddenly it was just us. "You know that name," he said. I nodded. Of course I did. Raffaele Santori. The cousin no one talked about. The shadow that lingered at the edge of every story about the rival family. The one who'd vanished before the bloodbath, before Andrea finished what the Santoris started. The one presumed dead because it was easier than admitting someone survived. "They said he was gone," I murmured. "They were wrong." My stomach tightened. "He hates you," I said. Andrea's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "He hates me because I lived." "And me?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to my belly, then back to my face. "He hates you because you stole the air once," he said. "And now you carry the last thing that matters." I sat down slowly. My legs felt unsteady, not weak, just aware of how much was inside me, how many lives depended on my body continuing to do its quiet, miraculous work. "What does he want?" I asked. Andrea didn't hesitate. "You." The word landed heavy. "And the baby," I whispered. "Yes." "Hold on, before I keep going. If this is your first time here, welcome. If it's not, then you already know nothing ever stays buried. Now, let me tell you what his name really meant." Raffaele Santori had been a ghost for years, a story whispered by men who didn't want Andrea to hear it, a cautionary tale about what happens when blood survives long enough to remember. "He believes I stole his future," Andrea said, pacing now, "that I took everything that should have been his. And he thinks I stole Marco." I added. Andrea stopped, turned to me. "You did," he said gently. I didn't flinch. "I know." "And he thinks this child," Andrea's voice tightened, "is the end of his line." I pressed my palm to my stomach. "She's not a thing," I said. "She's not a symbol." Andrea crossed back to me, knelt, rested his forehead against my belly like he needed to ground himself. "She is to him," he said quietly, and that's what makes him dangerous. The next few days unfolded like a slow tightening, not a panic, a preparation. Andrea didn't announce anything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cancel routines or pull Marco out of sight. He just sharpened the world. The guards changed shifts at irregular intervals. The cars rotated. Routes shifted without warning. Phones were checked. Cameras upgraded. And still, something slipped through. It was Lucia who noticed first. She brought me a folded piece of paper she'd found near the laundry entrance. No writing. No message. Just a pressed black feather. My heart sank, because the Santoris used feathers, always had. A symbol of unfinished business, of blood that learned how to fly. Andrea burned it in the fireplace without a word. Then he ordered every inch of the compound swept. Again, they found nothing. Which was worse. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe. Andrea's arm was heavy around my waist. His hand rested over my belly, fingers splayed, possessive and reverent all at once. He whispered to her sometimes, in Italian. Short phrases, promises, tesoro, piccola mia, sei al sicuro, you're safe. I didn't believe it, not because I doubted him, but because safety had never been part of loving him. Tell me the truth, I said into the dark. He didn't pretend not to hear. If he comes for me, I continued, what happens to Marco? Andrea's arm tightened. He disappears, he said. He becomes a ghost. No name, no face, no trail. And me? You survive, he said, or I burn the world until you do. I swallowed. And her? His hand pressed gently against my stomach. She will live, he said, voice ironclad, even if it costs me everything. The next morning, I watched Marco play in the garden. He was chasing a ball, laughing, shouting orders at guards like they were his personal army. I smiled. Then I noticed the man across the street. He wasn't close, not obvious, just standing too still, watching. When I blinked, he was gone. I told Andrea. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and said, he's closer than I want him to be. That night, Luca confirmed it. Surveillance pings, burner phones, a safe house discovered 2 neighborhoods away, empty but warm, occupied recently. Raffaele Santori is not hiding, Luca said. He's circling. Andrea nodded once. Good. I stared at him. That's not good. It is, he said. It means he's confident. And confident men make mistakes, I finished. Andrea looked at me then. Really looked. You always did understand monsters. I didn't correct him. Because I wasn't watching Raffaele Santori like prey. I was watching him like a mother. And mothers don't hunt to win. They hunt to end threats. That night, I pressed my palm to my belly and whispered to my daughter, there's a man who thinks you shouldn't exist. She kicked hard in response. I smiled through the fear. Too bad, I whispered back, because you're already stronger than him. It was supposed to be simple. A visit to the pediatrician's office for Marco, a short stop at the charity center to drop off donated supplies, maybe a coffee on the way back. 2 hours, 5 guards, 3 vehicles, standard protocol. Except I changed the route, because I was tired of being protected like a piece of glass. Tired of Andrea watching me like I might shatter at any second. Tired of the way everyone held their breath when I walked into a room. I wasn't dying. I was carrying life, and I needed to remember what freedom felt like, just for a little while. I'll take the longer road, I told Matteo that morning. He hesitated. Andrea said, I know what Andrea said. He shifted. He won't like it. He never does. I smiled to soften the words, held Marco's hand tighter, watched my son swing his toy sword like he was defending an invisible princess. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't careless. I was brave. That was the difference, I told myself. Brave enough to breathe. Brave enough to believe I was more than the fear in my husband's eyes. We left the compound just after 9. The sun was bright, the city alive. Marco sang the whole way to the clinic, loud and off-key, turning the back seat into a concert hall. My hand never left my belly. She'd been quiet that morning. No kicks, no flutters, just a soft weight under my ribs like she was saving her strength. I whispered to her anyway. We're okay, I said. Papa would have sent a damn army if he didn't trust the team. I didn't realize then, he had. But someone inside the army didn't belong. We made it to the doctor. Marco got a sticker for being so brave about his shots. I got 2 sets of smiles from nurses who didn't know my name but recognized the guards. We walked out of the clinic at 10:07. At 10:12, the reroute started. I'm going to the center, I told Matteo as we reached the main road. He glanced at his phone. That's not on today's plan. It is now. Boss said no detours. I turned to face him fully. I built that charity wing. I trained every volunteer there. I started it before Andrea ever knew my name. He didn't move. Do you want to call him? I asked softly. Because he wouldn't. Because he was loyal, but not that brave. Matteo swallowed. I'll adjust the route. 10 minutes later, I realized something was off. Not loud. Not obvious. Just off. Too much silence on the radio. A black SUV idling too long at the corner. A woman in sunglasses standing still for no reason, holding a newspaper upside down. Pregnancy sharpens your instincts. Or maybe survival does. Either way, my stomach dropped before the gunshot ever came. The driver's side window shattered first. Glass exploded across the front seat. Marco screamed. I lunged sideways, shielding him with my body as the second shot cracked the side mirror. Matteo yelled something. The tires squealed. Doors opened. Guards spilled out. Bullets snapped against metal. My hand went to my belly before I even realized I was bleeding. Not deep, just a slice across my arm from the glass. But still, blood. Matteo grabbed the car door, dragging me out. We have to move. Marco. He's with Paolo. Go. I ran. Pregnancy slowed me. Adrenaline didn't care. We moved behind the SUV, crossed to the alley, more gunfire behind us, and then the second betrayal bullets, not knives. A voice. One I recognized. One that belonged to our side. Drop the weapon, the man said, aiming at Matteo. Matteo froze. What the? The shot hit him in the leg. He collapsed. I screamed. Then ran. I didn't get far. Hands grabbed me. Too many, too strong. I kicked. Bit, fought. One slammed into my ribs. Another wrapped a cloth around my mouth. The smell hit instantly. Sweet, chemical, heavy. I choked. And the last thing I heard was Marco screaming my name. Still with me? Because this is the part I wish I could forget. This is the day I stopped being brave. And started being broken. Andrea got the call at 10:29 a.m. But it wasn't a call. It was a silence. One of his men reported a breach. Then the line cut out. Luca ran the tracker in under 15 seconds. 2 GPS pings gone. One flipped off manually. One jammed. Andrea didn't speak, didn't blink, just turned and walked toward the weapons room. He arrived at the scene less than 20 minutes later. Marco was in Paolo's arms, crying, safe but shaking. The SUV was riddled with bullets. 2 bodies on the ground. Matteo unconscious, bleeding out, but alive. No sign of me. No sign of the baby. No ransom note, no message, just blood. Andrea stood in the middle of it all and said nothing. Luca approached slowly. They took her, he said. Andrea looked down at the pavement, at a smear of red too dark to be mine. Then he turned to Luca. I want every camera in the city pulled, every black market dock watched, every burner phone traced. He glanced at Marco, who was still sobbing into Paolo's neck. His voice dropped. Send him away. Where? Somewhere no one knows. Not even me. Luca hesitated. What do I tell him? Andrea's jaw clenched. Tell him his sister needs him to be brave. The city held its breath for the rest of the day. Andrea didn't issue threats. He didn't call in allies. He didn't wait for demands. He just disappeared into the dark and began preparing to end whatever world had dared to touch me again. I woke up choking on plastic. Not suffocating, controlled. A hood, loose enough to breathe, tight enough to remind me I wasn't meant to see. My wrists burned. Not from rope, from cuffs. Metal biting into bone with every jolt of the vehicle beneath me. I tried to move. Pain answered. Low. Sharp. Everywhere. Pregnancy didn't dull it. It sharpened it. Turned every sensation into something bright and merciless. I forced myself to breathe anyway, in, out, for her. Someone spoke near my ear. Not loud, not cruel, just efficient. Easy, a man said. You fight, you bleed, the baby screams. You don't want that. I froze. My body went still instinctively, like an animal realizing resistance would cost more than compliance. I swallowed. Where is my son? I rasped. Silence, then, not our target. Relief hit so hard my vision swam. My head lolled back against the seat as the car turned again. Faster now, tires humming, engine steady. This wasn't a grab and run. This was planned. Time slipped. Minutes? Hours? The drug in my system kept me conscious but heavy, like I was moving through water. I counted breaths, counted heartbeats, pressed my knees together whenever the road dipped, instinct screaming to protect the life inside me. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. When the vehicle finally stopped, hands dragged me out. Cold air slapped my face. The hood came off. I blinked hard. Concrete, fluorescent lights, a warehouse or something dressed up to look like one. Too clean, too deliberate. A man stood in front of me. Tall, dark hair cut short, smile too calm. "I was beginning to worry," he said. "You fought harder than expected." I stared at him. "You're Santori." He inclined his head. "Raffaele." The name tasted like ash. "You're supposed to be dead." "So they said." They strapped me to a chair, not cruelly, carefully. Straps across my chest, my thighs, my ankles. Enough to hold, not enough to bruise. Raffaele circled me like I was a piece of art he'd finally reclaimed. "You know what I admire most?" he asked. "You didn't scream when you saw me." "I'm pregnant," I said flatly. "Not stupid." He smiled. "Good." He crouched, brought his face level with mine. "I told them to take you alive." My stomach twisted. "And the baby?" I asked. "Oh, especially the baby." The door behind him opened. Another man stepped in, older, nervous. "The perimeter's clean," he said. "No tails." Raffaele stood. "Good. Then we're ahead of him." My chest tightened. Ahead of Andrea. Andrea arrived at the site 13 minutes after they left. 13 minutes. That's how close he was. Close enough to smell the gunpowder still clinging to the air. Close enough to hear Marco's sobs echoing in his skull long after the sound had stopped. Close enough to see the blood on the pavement and know, no, it wasn't enough to be mine. He didn't ask questions. He didn't kneel. He stood in the middle of the street and let the silence speak. Then he said quietly, "This is not ransom." Luca nodded. "No calls, no demands." Andrea's eyes went dark. "They didn't take her for money," he said. "They took her for blood." Back in the warehouse, Raffaele leaned against a table and watched me breathe. "You see," he said conversationally, "killing you would be simple, effective, but simple things don't last." I said nothing. I focused on her, on the steady pressure under my ribs, on the fact that she was still moving. "You stole my family once." He continued. "You ran with the air and humiliated us, and then you stayed. You built a life in his house." His voice sharpened. "And now you carry the last thing that matters." "I didn't steal him," I said. "I saved him." Raffaele laughed. A real laugh. Warm, wrong. Everyone tells themselves that. They left me alone after that. Lights on, door locked, no windows, time stretched thin. I shifted as much as the restraints allowed, tested the straps. Not weak, not loose. Designed to hold me through labor. That thought nearly broke me. I swallowed it down. Not yet. Hours later, maybe more, footsteps returned. Raffaele stood in the doorway, phone in hand. "He knows now," he said. "He's hiding the boy." "Good." My heart lifted at that. "Smart man." He smiled. "He always was. That's why this has to be done properly." "Then kill me," I said. "Get it over with." Raffaele shook his head slowly. "No, death is a release." He stepped closer. "You're going to give him something to remember." Andrea didn't sleep that night. He didn't eat. He moved Marco before dawn. No lights, no convoy, no trail, just a car, a trusted man, and a location even Luca didn't know. Then he came back and closed the door. And the city learned what it meant when Andrea Marcarelli stopped pretending he was civilized. He cut off talks, burned bridges, activated names that hadn't been spoken in years. By nightfall, 3 Santori-connected businesses were ash. Still no call. Still no demand. Andrea welcomed the silence. In the warehouse, pain bloomed low in my back. Not labor. Not yet. Just my body reminding me it was under strain. I breathed through it. Counted again. In. Out. For her. Raffaele returned once more before dawn. He stood very still this time, almost respectful. "You know," he said, "my mother died screaming. Childbirth. No doctors. No mercy. My blood ran cold. That's history," he continued. "I prefer symmetry." I met his gaze. "You won't break me." He smiled thinly. "I don't need to." He turned and left. The door shut. Locked. And in the silence, with metal biting into my skin and fear pressing down like a weight, I whispered the only truth that mattered. He's coming. Because Andrea Marcarelli did not negotiate. He annihilated. The world didn't shake when she was taken, didn't burn. Not at first. At first, it just went quiet. And that was how I knew. Because Andrea Marcarelli doesn't rage like other men, he doesn't scream, doesn't beg, he doesn't cry in doorways or collapse to his knees in a spotlight of grief. He just stops pretending to be human and becomes the thing the underworld tells stories about. He shut down the estate within an hour. No one in, no one out. He sent Marco deeper underground than anyone thought possible. Not to friends, not to family, to ghosts, to men who owed him blood from the old days, when power wasn't polished and political. It was soaked in dirt, in smoke, in flesh. He burned their real names. "Marco no longer exists," he said to Luca. "Not until she's home." I didn't see it happen. I only heard about it later, whispered by men who flinched when they said his name. The safe house in Palermo, raided and emptied. The Santori pipeline on the eastern border destroyed, bodies left in a silent row. The diplomatic line from Milan, cut. Andrea didn't ask for allies anymore. He reminded them they were already his. Luca found him in the basement that night. Weapons laid out like scripture. Guns, knives, ledgers of names blacked out and circled in red. She's still alive, Luca said carefully. Andrea didn't look up. She has to be, Luca continued. She is. Andrea's voice was steel. Luca nodded. Then, quieter, you said you'd never go back. Andrea finally looked at him. I lied. He activated men we hadn't seen since the last war. Men without fingerprints or homes, loyal to no flag but his. They called him Il Diavolo again, the devil. And Andrea didn't correct them. At the warehouse, I woke to contractions, not full labor, not yet, but warning signs. A pulse of pain, low and sharp, followed by a pressure that made me grit my teeth. The baby twisted. My breath caught. Not now. Please not now. Raffaele hadn't visited in hours, but I knew he was close. He wanted her born in this cage, born in a war she hadn't asked for, born screaming so he could say, Andrea lost everything. I counted each wave of pain. They weren't regular yet, but they were coming. I shifted my weight to ease the ache. The restraints rubbed raw. Still no food. Still no doctor. Just water and silence and the sound of rats scurrying behind the walls. Andrea was 2 steps ahead. He found the man who smuggled the van across city lines. Didn't kill him. He let him live, long enough to talk. And when the name Raffaele Santori passed that traitor's lips, Andrea smiled. Just once. Then broke the man's fingers one by one. He moved fast after that. 3 hideouts burned, 4 corrupt officers exposed. A hacker team pulled every satellite feed from the surrounding 10 miles. And still no exact location. But the perimeter was shrinking. Every move Raffaele made cost him another inch of safety. Back in the cage, my body kept rebelling. I closed my eyes and whispered to her. I need you to stay, I said. Just a little longer. She shifted under my ribs, not scared, strong. And I realized, with a pain I didn't expect, that she was fighting with me. Not because she understood, but because she felt me, and I wasn't done yet. The door opened mid-contraction. I gritted my teeth, keeping still as the pressure burned hot across my abdomen. Raffaele stepped in. He saw it immediately. You're early, he said. Disappointed? No, pleased. He crouched in front of me again like we were old friends playing a long game. She'll come here, in this place, in my hands. My voice was hoarse. You won't touch her. His smile was slow, measured. You don't get to choose. Andrea was 5 hours out when Luca gave him the update. One more sighting. A burned license plate matched on an old industrial dockyard. Cameras blacked out, the perfect graveyard for a child not yet born. Andrea loaded his weapons in silence. He strapped on the bulletproof vest with practiced hands, then looked up at Luca. If I don't make it, you will. Andrea's jaw tensed. If I don't, he repeated, protect Marco and destroy every bloodline tied to his name. Luca didn't argue again. He just nodded and handed him one last knife. In the cage, the pain sharpened. This time I couldn't hide it. I gasped, my body clenched, my hands trembled. Raffaele tilted his head. She's coming faster than expected. I glared at him. If she dies, I said, voice shaking, there will be no place on this earth safe enough to hide you. He smiled like I amused him. No one will come. Someone always comes, I whispered. Back at the estate, Lucia found a note slipped under the pantry door. It was a feather. Black. Pressed flat. Andrea had left one just like it in Raffaele's mother's casket years ago. A symbol of what was unfinished and what would come full circle. Andrea didn't take a team. Not this time. He wanted silence. Precision. Blood without witnesses. He drove himself, crossed the city like a shadow. And when he reached the docks, he parked without headlights, walked into the dark with only vengeance for light. In the cage, I screamed for the first time. Her foot kicked under my ribs hard enough to steal breath. My body was beginning the process whether I wanted it to or not. I sobbed once, then bit it down. I had to stay calm. Not for me. For her. Because she needed time. Because Andrea was coming. And if I broke now, I'd never see him again. Somewhere, on the far edge of the compound, I heard shouting. Doors slamming. Feet running. One man screamed, then silence, then another scream, cut short. I smiled through the pain. Because I knew that sound. I knew what it meant when the devil arrived without knocking. Andrea Marcarelli had come for his family, and he wasn't leaving until we were all whole again. I couldn't tell how long I'd been strapped down. Hours? A day? Pain had replaced time. Contractions flared like wildfire, too early, too sharp, not steady yet, not real labor, but close. Close enough to scare me, close enough that I had to fight not to scream, because if I looked too weak, they'd take her early. If I looked too strong, they'd punish me for it. So I stayed in between, not crying, not silent, just enduring, and waiting for the devil I'd chosen to love. The cage wasn't metal, not literal. It was a converted storage room with bolted doors and a single cot where I'd been strapped upright like a display. Raffaele said it was for circulation. He said it with a smile, like we were sharing a joke. He hadn't come back in hours, not since the last contraction made me bleed through the thin layer of fabric they left me with. But I wasn't alone. The camera in the corner clicked softly every 20 minutes, watching, recording, waiting. I wasn't scared of dying, not really. I was scared of her never hearing my voice, of never feeling my arms, of growing up in someone else's story, with someone else rewriting how she came into this world. I was scared of what would be taken from her. And Marco and Andrea. I whispered her name again. We hadn't spoken it out loud yet, Andrea and I. Not even once. Superstition, maybe. Or fear. Or something ancient that ran through the blood of men who ruled empires with rings and silence. But I had it, tucked behind my teeth like a prayer. And I whispered it now, just for her. The door clicked. I didn't look up right away. My body hurt too much, and I already knew who it was by the scent. Cheap cologne, expensive rage. Raffaele entered slowly, hands behind his back, like a teacher inspecting a disobedient student. "You're bleeding again," he said, voice soft. "I'm also still breathing," I murmured. "Sorry to disappoint," he chuckled, walked closer, then crouched in front of me. "She's coming," he said. "I know." "You won't survive it." I met his eyes, didn't blink. "I've survived worse than you." He stood, turned away like he was bored, then, casually, "Do you know what your child will be?" "Mine," he laughed. "No, she'll be a story." He paced slowly, deliberately. "They'll say she was born in a cage, born screaming, born to a mother who died in chains. She'll grow up knowing her father gave up his kingdom just to bury her safely." I kept my voice steady. "Andrea will never give you that." "He will," Raffaele said, "because soon he'll have no other choice." I didn't flinch when he left, but I let my head fall back against the wall, breathed in, breathed out. Pain rolled through me again, lower, meaner. My stomach tightened, hips locking up, spine burning. She shifted. A foot or elbow slid under my ribs. I whispered her name again, and I swore she kicked harder. Somewhere outside the room, a gunshot cracked through the silence. One, then two more. Muffled. Quick. Raffaele didn't return. Neither did anyone else, but I started to count, because I knew that pattern. Andrea never fired more than once per target. 2 meant warning, 3 meant confirmation, silence afterward meant clean kill. I waited, throat dry, muscles trembling, every part of me stretched tight around the ache of holding her in, but I waited, because I felt him getting closer. Not just Andrea. My Andrea. The man I met in a hospital room, the one who looked at me like I was the ghost of every woman he'd failed, the one who hated me for stealing his son, the one who kissed me like survival depended on it, the one who once whispered, "I am more monster than man, but I will never let them touch you." That man was coming, and he wasn't bringing mercy. Somewhere to my left I heard metal groan. A door kicked open, then silence. Then screaming. Not mine, not Marco's, theirs. Andrea moved like a shadow wrapped in vengeance. By the time Raffaele realized the outer guards weren't responding, Andrea was already inside the plaque compound. He didn't kick down the front door, he melted through the side. Luca was waiting outside in case backup was needed. Andrea said nothing to him. He just walked. 2 knives, 1 silenced pistol, no hesitation. He cleared 5 rooms in under 4 minutes, no survivors. By the time he reached the final hall, blood coated his sleeves. He found the last guard panicking, gun raised, hand shaking. Andrea didn't blink, didn't stop. The knife hit the man's neck before the trigger could pull. He fell without a sound. Inside the cage, I felt her drop. Not fully, but enough to know. My body was giving out. The next contraction hit so hard I cried out. And that was when the door opened. Andrea didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just stood there, dark eyes locked on mine, chest heaving, covered in blood that wasn't his. He crossed the room in 3 strides. Hands gentle, movements exact. "I've got you," he said. My chin trembled. She's coming. She's early. I don't care. He unbuckled every strap with terrifying calm, cradled me close as I sagged into him, then pressed his forehead to mine. I told you, he whispered, voice breaking. They'd never take you from me. We didn't leave right away. We couldn't. Another contraction rolled through me and I screamed into his shoulder. He swore, low, vicious in Italian. Then he slid his arms under my legs and lifted me like I weighed nothing. She's crowning, I gasped. I know. We can't wait. I'm not. He laid me on the cot, gently, reverently, like I was something holy, then looked down at me like he was already kneeling in prayer. I need you to hold on, I nodded, not because I could, but because I had to. Outside the room, the compound burned. Luca entered 10 minutes later, back up behind him, faces pale at the bodies. But Andrea never looked away from me. Not once, not when I screamed, not when I bled, not even when I whispered our daughter's name as the world tried to end around us. I wanted to scream, not from pain, though it was there, rolling through me in waves that made the world blur, but from the truth. The cruel, jagged truth. We weren't safe yet. Andrea had found me. He'd killed to reach me. He held my hand as I bled through the sheets of a makeshift cot in a warehouse soaked with the scent of death. But my body didn't care that he was there. My body only cared that our daughter was coming, too fast, too soon, and that I had to survive. Because she wouldn't without me. Andrea knelt beside me, eyes never leaving my face. Every contraction hit like a freight train. I couldn't hide it anymore. The shaking, the sweat. The sounds I didn't recognize as my own. My knees trembled uncontrollably. My skin burned. I couldn't tell if I was breathing too fast or not at all, but his hand never left mine, and his voice never wavered. You hold on, he said. You hold on, and I will take care of the rest. Luca entered the room, eyes flicking across the bloody cot, the restraints on the floor, the bruises on my arms. We need to move her, he said. Andrea didn't look up. She can't be moved. I can arrange a doctor. No time. Andrea turned his head just enough to show his eyes. And Luca stopped speaking, because we all knew what he saw. Not panic, not desperation, but possession. Andrea wasn't leaving that room unless I walked out of it with him, alive and holding our child. The next contraction came with blood. Too much. I bit my tongue and felt iron flood my mouth. She was coming, but my body was warning me. This wasn't right. Something inside me was tearing apart too soon. Andrea saw it too. He took my face in both hands, wiped the sweat from my brow, and kissed my temple. You're the strongest thing I've ever known, he said. But if you pass out, if you give in now, they win. Tears slid down my cheeks. I'm not ready. You don't have to be, he whispered. You just have to keep going. You still with me? Because if you are, you already know this. Part doesn't end in softness. It ends in blood, in fury, in the unholy strength of a mother who refused to die. The next hour felt like a blur of pain stitched together by Andrea's voice. He never yelled, never panicked. He guided me through every contraction like he'd trained for this moment his whole life. I screamed until my throat went raw, felt my body split and burn, dragging our daughter closer to the world one breath at a time. And all the while, Andrea whispered her name, the name we never spoke. Until now, he said it like it was a command, a vow, a warning to the universe that she belonged to us and no one else. But I was bleeding too much. I knew it. He knew it. She was coming too fast and I was tearing from the inside out. A lesser man would have begged. Andrea didn't. He just took my face again, kissed my lips, and said, "Stay with me, Tesoro. Don't make me raise her without you." She came screaming, fists clenched, tiny body slick and red and fierce. Andrea caught her in his hands. Not a doctor, not a soldier, just a man in love with two girls the world tried to erase. He wrapped her in his shirt and pressed her to my chest. I sobbed because she was warm, alive, and mine. But the bleeding didn't stop. My body convulsed. Andrea's arms closed around me instantly. "Stay awake," he said. "I've got you." I fought to keep my eyes open. I wanted to hold her longer, to memorize the shape of her mouth, the smell of her skin, the sound of her soft, perfect cry. But everything was going dim. Andrea didn't hesitate. He handed her to Luca, who stood stunned, unsure if he should even touch her. "Wrap her up. Keep her warm. She makes a sound. You shoot anyone who breathes too loud." Luca nodded, took her, vanished. Andrea turned back to me, ripped open a medical kit I didn't even see him take from one of the guards. His hands moved fast, pressure on my abdomen. Bandages, injections. He was losing me, and he knew it. "Don't you dare leave me," he growled, voice shaking now. "Not after everything." "I'm trying," I whispered. He pressed our foreheads together. "You don't get to die. Not now. Not when I still need you." I wanted to say I loved him, but my lips couldn't move, so I looked at him, and I hoped he saw it there, in my eyes, in the breath I was still fighting to take, in the fact that I stayed. They brought the doctor 20 minutes later, too late to deliver her, not too late to save me. Andrea refused to leave the room. He held my hand as they worked, threatened the doctor with a slow death if he so much as looked away from his task. I slipped in and out of consciousness, each time hearing Andrea's voice pulling me back. "You survived worse," he whispered. "You'll survive this." Hours passed. By the time I was stable, the sun had begun to rise. The warehouse was empty. The men who took me were gone, the cameras were broken, and Andrea, blood-soaked, bruised, exhausted, was still sitting beside me, our daughter in his arms. I reached out. He shifted her into my embrace. I held her skin to skin, and she didn't cry. She just blinked up at me with eyes too big for her face, eyes that matched her father's. Andrea ran a hand through my hair. His voice was hoarse. "You gave her life." "She gave me a reason to live," I whispered. He leaned in, kissed me softly, then again longer. And when he pulled back, I saw something I hadn't seen in days. Relief. And love. "I should name her," I said. "You already did. Say it." His throat worked, voice thick. Sophia Marcarelli, born in captivity, born in fire, born to a mother who bled without mercy, but never gave up. They waited until the bleeding stopped, until Sophia was cleaned and sleeping against my chest, until Andrea had wrapped one arm around both of us like the only thing anchoring him to the earth. Then the call came. Not to me, not even to Andrea, to Luca. On a secure line, encrypted and rotating, accessed only once every 7 days. Andrea was in the hallway with his back to the wall, knife still strapped to his hip, shirt still stained with my blood. Luca's voice was low, cautious. "It's him." Andrea didn't blink. "Put it through." Raffaele Santori didn't sound like a man who lost. He sounded like a man who still believed the rules hadn't changed, that we were still in the same game, that Andrea hadn't already buried half his men, that I hadn't just given birth in a cage and lived. His voice was calm, even friendly. "Tell Andrea I'm calling with terms." Luca said nothing, just passed the phone to the devil himself. Andrea didn't greet him, didn't ask how he got the number, just said 2 words, "You're breathing." Raffaele chuckled. "For now." Andrea waited. "You know," Raffaele said, "I expected her to die, at least bleed out. She was early, wasn't she?" Andrea didn't answer. "She's alive?" Raffaele asked casually. "The baby?" Andrea's voice was like ice cracking. "Say her name." A pause. Then, mock regretfully, "We never got that far." Andrea's jaw flexed. "Then you don't get to speak of her again." Raffaele's tone shifted. Slick. Calculated. "Well, if you want her to stay alive, you'll consider what I'm offering." Andrea's eyes darkened. He walked to the far end of the hallway, shoulders tight. "What do you want?" "My future back," Raffaele said, "the one you stole." Andrea laughed once, a sharp, cold sound. "You were born useless. I just made it official." Silence. "Then, here's the offer," Raffaele said, voice tightening. "Public surrender. You step down. You denounce the Marcarelli name. Call it corrupt. Call it cursed. Say you're done. Retire with your family to whatever countryside villa you prefer, and I won't touch them." Andrea's hand clenched around the phone. "You want me to erase myself. I want you to admit you were never strong enough to carry the crown. And if I say no, you won't say no," Raffaele said smoothly, "because if you do, the next time I come for them, I won't miss." I didn't hear all of the call, just enough. Andrea walked back into the room with fire in his eyes and silence in his mouth. He didn't speak until he was beside me again, stroking Sophia's tiny back with one fingertip. Then quietly, "He wants my legacy." I nodded. "He can't have it. He wants me to vanish, to leave the family, the power, the empire." "And if you do?" Andrea looked down at Sophia, then at me. "He still wins. It was never about money. It never had been. This was about the bloodline, about erasing the name that had survived too many wars, destroying the family he couldn't kill outright, and punishing the woman who carried it forward in her womb. Me. Andrea didn't take long to respond. He called Luca back an hour later. "Set the meat." "Boss, are you?" Andrea cut him off. "He wants a performance? I'll give him one. Luca's hesitation was barely audible. And if it's a trap? Then we don't walk away, Andrea said. We burn it down. I should have been scared, weakened, recovering, a mother with a newborn and a body stitched back together by adrenaline and willpower. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. Because Raffaele wanted us erased, not just physically but historically. He wanted the world to forget we existed, to forget that I stole Andrea's son and raised him into a future, to forget that I carried Sofia through hell and bled for her without mercy. He wanted to silence the truth. So I did something Andrea didn't expect. I stood, still shaky, still sore, but upright. I put Sofia in his arms and looked him in the eyes. I'm going with you. Andrea's jaw tightened. No, I have to. You just gave birth, and I need him to see what he failed to kill. Andrea stared at me for a long moment, then looked down at our daughter. When he looked back up, something in his expression shifted. Approval, respect, a dark, obsessive pride. You want to remind him? No, I said. I want to haunt him. The meet was set in the ruins of an old Santori villa, bombed in the last war, left to decay. Symbolic. Andrea didn't bring an army. He brought me. He brought Sofia. And he wore his wedding ring for the first time in public. He never put it on before. Said he wasn't the kind of man who deserved symbols of devotion. But that day he made sure the cameras caught it. Raffaele arrived with a full security team, 5 cars, 8 guards. No family, because he had none left. He looked at us like we were ghosts, like he couldn't believe we'd survived. Andrea stepped forward first. Surrender? He called across the empty courtyard. Here I am. Raffaele smiled slowly. Well, the devil brings his bride and heir to the altar. Andrea didn't flinch. He just turned, took my hand, and pulled me forward, then unwrapped Sofia's blanket so Raffaele could see her. Tiny, warm, sleeping, alive. Say her name, Andrea said again. Raffaele stared, nothing. Andrea smiled. I didn't think so. Then he pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket, tossed it at Raffaele's feet. It was the original Santori surrender, signed by Raffaele's father 20 years ago when the Marcarelli family took their crown. Legacy matters, Andrea said. Bloodlines matter. He glanced at me, then at Sofia. We don't run from ours. Then he raised his gun and shot Raffaele's right-hand man in the head. One clean shot. Before any of the guards could draw their weapons, Luca stepped from the shadows with backup. Every Santori gun was suddenly outnumbered, trained, outflanked, surrounded. Andrea walked up to Raffaele slowly, gun lowered, words quiet. You don't get to erase us, he said. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't even get to die like a legend. He stepped closer. So here's my offer. Live in exile. Alone. Forgotten. Powerless. Raffaele swallowed. Andrea's eyes burned. Because death would make you a martyr. But obscurity? His voice dropped to a whisper. Obscurity kills everything. Then he turned his back and walked away. We didn't watch Raffaele fall apart. We didn't need to. He knew. He knew. He had failed. The daughter was born. The mother survived. The bloodline endured. And we had chosen each other again, not through peace, but through war. That night, Andrea lay beside me with Sofia curled on his chest. The moonlight touched the edge of his ring. His voice was soft. He wanted me to give you up. I ran my fingers through his hair. You didn't. No, he said, I never will. I never thought I'd return to the cage. But I did, not in chains this time, not bleeding or bound or screaming. I walked in on my own 2 feet, holding Sofia in one arm, a silent promise burning in my chest. The warehouse had been emptied, sterilized, erased. All signs of what happened here were gone. But I remembered. The screams, the pain, the moment I thought neither of us would survive. Andrea stood just behind me. He hadn't spoken since we arrived. He hadn't needed to. This was for me, not for vengeance, for memory, for reclamation. I turned to him. Leave me here for a minute? His jaw tightened. No. Please. He looked at Sofia, now asleep against my heart, then at me. His expression didn't soften, but he stepped back, 1 foot outside the threshold, close enough to hear me breathe, far enough to give me space. I lowered myself onto the cot, the same one where my daughter had taken her first breath. I ran a hand across the worn fabric. And I whispered the truth. They didn't break me. They tried. God, they tried. But no one breaks a mother whose only goal is to live. Not escape. Not revenge. Just survival. Because survival means your baby survives too. Because defiance isn't a scream. It's a choice. I left the cage without crying. Not even once. Andrea didn't ask what I did in there. But later that night, I found a single camera from the original setup still powered on. Andrea had left it there, recording only me, only that moment, and he saved the footage like a confession. But the war wasn't over. Raffaele might have been humiliated, but he wasn't gone. We knew men like him didn't disappear quietly. So when Andrea said we were moving again deeper into the Sicilian countryside, I didn't argue. I packed Sophia's things. Marco was returned home. I hugged him tight, kissed his cheeks, and then held his hand tight, and walked away from our estate like it was just a chapter, not the ending. The new safe house was silent stone and shadowed windows, the kind of place where echoes had no names and ghosts didn't bother knocking. I liked it immediately. So did Andrea. It reminded us both of what mattered, not the walls, not the wealth, each other. But safety makes you forget how fast it can shatter. 3 weeks after Sophia's birth, I woke to silence. No crying, no footsteps, no breathing beside me. Andrea was gone. Sophia was gone. Panic flared before I even registered movement. Then the door opened, and Andrea stepped in with her, wrapped in his arms. She wouldn't sleep, he said, voice rough with exhaustion. I reached for her, held her close, and something cracked open inside me. It wasn't weakness, it was rage, because I realized I'd started hoping we were safe again. And hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. That night, I asked Andrea to take me back to the training grounds. Not for him. For me. You just gave birth, he said. Exactly, I answered, and they'll assume I'm weak. He stared at me like I'd grown fangs, then took my hand. Then let's remind them who you are. The first time I stepped back into the training ring, the guards stared. Some nodded respectfully, others exchanged looks. They weren't used to women in the pit, especially not mothers, especially not me. But when I lifted the training knife and moved like I still remembered how to cut, their respect came fast and absolute. Andrea didn't step in. Not until the 3rd round, when I was already breathless, slick with sweat, and riding a high I didn't know I'd missed. He entered the ring without a word, held up his hands, and waited. I lunged. He dodged, smirked. You're slower? I'm bleeding less. He grinned, and we moved like two people who knew every inch of each other, mind, body, history, future. We didn't fight to win. We fought to remember. Later, lying in the grass outside the ring, I asked him something I'd never dared. What would you have done if I died? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, killed everyone who saw it happen. I nodded. That's what I thought. Then he turned to me, eyes dark, honest, raw, and then I'd have raised her with my bare hands, taught her to burn kingdoms, taught her your name first, so no one would ever forget. I kissed him, because there was no other answer. The next day a package arrived, no return address. Andrea opened it with gloved hands and military precision. Inside, a photograph of me, of Sophia, taken the week before, through a scope. Andrea didn't say a word, just passed it to me. I studied the photo for 2 seconds, then looked up. I want to choose who dies first. His eyes met mine. Then we'll make a list. We didn't run this time. We prepared. We layered security. We contacted the old loyalists, ones who owed Andrea favors too deep to ignore. And I, freshly healed, freshly furious, began training again. Not for show, not for ego, but for blood. Because the next time they came for us, they weren't walking away. Sophia slept in my arms every night. Marco curled against my other side. And Andrea? He stood by the door, back straight, gun loaded, always watching, always ready. And every time I looked at him, I saw the truth. This wasn't just about legacy anymore. It was about love, the kind that survives cages, the kind that survives blood, the kind that defies death. They tried to break me. They failed. They tried to erase him. They failed harder. They tried to end what we built. But we're still standing, still bleeding, still defiant. I knew the moment it started. It wasn't a cramp, not nerves, not post-birth recovery. It was wrong, too sharp, too low. A hot pressure like something tearing loose deep inside. And it was too early. Sophia was barely a month old. My body had barely healed. But I wasn't bleeding from trauma. I was bleeding from inside. Again. Andrea wasn't in the room, which meant I had about 3 minutes to decide whether to tell him the truth or handle it alone. My instincts were still in survival mode, so I chose alone. I padded barefoot to the bathroom, pressing a palm between my thighs like that could somehow stop what was already happening. The tile was cold, the air sharp. I turned on the water and gripped the sink until my knuckles went white. Then I looked down. Blood. Too much. Not from a wound, not from an incision. Internal. Deep. and something inside me whispered the same word over and over again. Too early. Andrea walked in while I was still gripping the counter. He didn't speak right away, just stared at me, taking in every detail. The towel clutched in my hand, the way I was breathing, the blood smeared down my thigh. His voice dropped to a growl. Who touched you? No one. What happened? I don't know. It just started. He crossed the room in 2 strides and lifted me like I weighed nothing. No resistance. No asking permission. He laid me down on the bed and pressed his hand to my abdomen. Pain? Yes. How much? 7. He gave me a look. I sighed. 9. Luca appeared within 5 minutes, already dialing the doctor. Andrea gave orders like a machine, cold, fast, lethal. Sophia was handed to a nanny. Marco was taken to the lower levels, and I was stripped, cleaned, and re-examined by the same doctor who helped save me after Sophia's birth. This time his hands shook. This isn't right, he said. The lining never fully repaired. The bleeding's internal, her uterus. Andrea cut him off. Can she survive this? The doctor hesitated. If it doesn't rupture? Yes. And the child? I blinked. What child? The doctor stared. Andrea did too. Silence stretched too long. Then the doctor said softly, You didn't know? It hit me like a wave. Not grief. Not joy. Just shock. And then fear. Because it meant I was pregnant again. Only weeks after nearly dying in labor, before my body was ready, before I was ready. Andrea sat beside me, didn't touch me, didn't speak. But his presence filled the room like a shadow. I reached for him. He didn't flinch. He just took my hand and held it like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Later, when we were alone, I whispered, I didn't know. He nodded once. I believe you. I didn't even have symptoms. You've been in recovery. Of course you didn't. I looked at him. You're not angry? He turned to me, slow, deliberate. Erica, I would burn the world for one of you. If there's another, I'll destroy heaven too. I wanted to laugh or cry. Instead, I whispered, I don't know if I can survive another birth. He didn't speak, didn't argue, just slid closer, wrapped me in his arms, and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. We'll survive it together. But fate doesn't wait for promises. By morning the bleeding had worsened, and by nightfall I was screaming. Again. The contractions came harder this time, faster. There was no 9 months, no safe zone, no warning, just agony and blood. Andrea held me through it all. Not a word, not a sound, just him, his hands, his voice, his refusal to let go. But even he couldn't slow it, and I already knew the truth. This baby wasn't coming because it was time. This baby was coming because my body couldn't hold on. I don't remember blacking out. I remember the tearing, the pressure, the heat, then nothing. I woke in darkness, silence, pain, and Andrea's voice. Tesoro, come back. I blinked. Everything was white, the sheets, the lights, his shirt, only his eyes stayed dark. I tried to speak. He shook his head. Don't. Just breathe. I looked down. My hands were clean, my arms were empty, but there was a faint sound, a whimper, a heartbeat, a baby, alive. Andrea saw the moment I understood. She's small, he said softly, but she made it. She? He smiled, barely. Sophia's twin. I froze. What? The doctor thinks they split late. Rare. Risky. He exhaled. You carried 2 hearts and didn't even know it. I cried then, for all of it. The pain, the terror, the miracle, and he let me, held me, whispered the names he'd already chosen. 2 girls, he said, 2 daughters, both with your fire. The second child was smaller, quieter. But when they placed her in my arms that night, warm, breathing, real, I knew something else. They hadn't ended anything. Not my blood. Not my body. Not this family. They tried. God, they tried. But I was still here, still alive, and so were both of my daughters. Andrea kissed my forehead like a prayer. You gave me everything, he whispered. Everything they tried to destroy. And when he looked at me, eyes full of something fierce and unbreakable, I knew what came next. We were done hiding, done running. They made a mistake trying to break a woman who bled for her children. Now, it was my turn. They thought they'd broken me in that cage, that watching me bleed, scream, and fall apart was enough to end me. But they forgot something. I didn't give birth in fear. I gave birth in fire. And fire doesn't break, it burns. The second twin, our littlest girl, came into the world the same way her sister did. Too early, too small, too fierce to die. She was born in the dark of a backroom medical setup with barely enough light to see her face and no lullabies but the sound of Andrea's voice swearing he'd keep her safe. And I knew the second I heard her cry. We had just rewritten history. Luca told us later, Raffaele had planned it months ago. Not the attack, not the ransom, not the war, the erasure. To take my body, to take the baby, to take the only heir that could continue the Marcorelli line, and use her as a symbol of his victory. But he didn't know there were two. He didn't know we'd survive. He didn't know Andrea Marcorelli would kneel beside my blood-soaked body and refuse to let me go. He thought he was ending a name. Instead, he birthed a legacy. Sofia slept on my chest. Her sister, smaller, quieter, rested in a heated crib beside me. Andrea never left my side. He paced the room like a lion in a cage, gun still holstered, shirt still stained, eyes flicking to every sound like the war hadn't ended. Because to him it hadn't. "They'll try again," he said that night, voice low, rough. "They always do." I didn't argue. I just reached for his hand and squeezed. Then let them. It wasn't courage. Not exactly. It was defiance, the kind only a mother earns through agony, the kind only a woman earns when she chooses not to die. I should have been dead, but I wasn't, because I still had more to protect. Andrea named the second twin. I gave him the honor because I knew how deep it ran, how names in his world meant more than legacy. They were armor. He chose Vittoria, victory. We stayed underground for 3 more months, not in a bunker, not in a clinic, in a fortress. One he built before he ever met me. One meant to house ghosts and secrets, not newborn daughters and a woman who refused to break. But it was ours now, and they would never get in again. The press tried to speculate, photos leaked, 2 girls, not one. Born in secrecy, no official name releases, no public statements, and no photos of me. Andrea made sure of it. If the world wants to know your face, he said, they can die first. But I had my own answer. While he was waging war with silence, I wrote a letter. 1 page, sealed in black wax, delivered by hand to Raffaele's last known contact. It read, "You didn't kill me. You crowned me. Her name is Victory. Try again, I dare you." Andrea found out 2 days later. He didn't yell, didn't snap. He stood in the doorway holding Vittoria in one arm, watching me breastfeed Sofia with the calm of a man who knew exactly how close to death he'd been and how violently he planned to protect the reason he wasn't. "You baited him. I warned him." His mouth twitched. "There's a difference?" "Yes," I said. "One invites attack, the other promises ruin." He stared at me for a long moment, then he crossed the room and kissed the top of my head. "You really are mine." The days blurred after that. Midnight feedings, blood checks, security rotations. Our compound became a living organism, breathing and shifting around us. Marco stayed close, too close sometimes, always watching, always listening. Andrea told him the truth in pieces, that I had been hurt, that his sisters had come early, that the people who did it were gone, but not all of them. And Marco, our son, looked up at his father and said, "Then I'll help you find the rest." He was 3, but he was already Marcorelli. The first night I could stand without bleeding, I went outside. The air was sharp, the moon was full. Andrea followed me without speaking. He wrapped a coat around my shoulders, stood behind me, and let the silence settle. Then he said it. The thing I didn't know I needed to. "Here. You didn't survive this." I turned. He looked at me, eyes like fire, voice low and dangerous. "You won this." That night we made love for the first time since the war ended. Not soft, not slow, but real. Because it wasn't about passion, it was about ownership of our bodies, of our lives, of the story they tried to write without us. He kissed every scar, held my hips like he was relearning what it meant to touch me without fear. I pulled him deeper, closer, until we weren't 2 people anymore. We were a claim. His mouth brushed my ear as he moved, voice guttural and raw. "They thought they ended us." I bit back a moan. "They failed." He buried his face in my neck and whispered, "They're about to learn how badly." Later, after the heat faded, he lay beside me with one arm wrapped around my waist, the other resting lightly across my stomach. A silence stretched between us. The good kind, the kind that feels like safety. And then softly, I said it, "We made a family in hell." His answer was a promise. "We'll raise them in fire." The next morning, Sofia opened her eyes before sunrise. So did Vittoria. I sat in bed with both girls in my arms, Andrea behind me, Marco curled between my legs, and I smiled. Because this blood-soaked, war-birthed, bulletproof love, this was the family they tried to end, and this was just the beginning. They tried to erase them, tried to end their bloodline. But she gave birth to 2 daughters in the middle of a war, and he didn't stop fighting until he held all 3 in his arms. This isn't just survival, it's victory. And the story isn't over. Book 3, The Crown and the Coffin, is coming soon. Don't miss the final war. Thank you for spending your time with me, listening to my story. You are the reason I tell it. So subscribe and hit that notification button so that you don't miss the next installment in this war of a love story. Until next time, be ever aware of who you let around you. Not everyone has your best interest of heart. Some stay close to cause you the most pain.